We cannot grow aught in this bog. The seeds are rotted.
It is the Lord's trial, Master Davies.
You see how the water moves through the new trench. This brings life to the rice and keeps the salt away.
We've done it! The swamp yields gold!
Thanks to your knowledge, this harvest is bountiful beyond measure.
The shipments to Bristol must be prioritized, as the demand for Carolina rice is unprecedented.
Indeed. Stop everything, because what I'm about to show you is the most morally complex transformation in American history. And here's the shocking part. It created both incredible prosperity and unspeakable injustice at exactly the same time. Picture this. It's 1670. Charleston, South Carolina, is a struggling frontier settlement where English colonists are literally starving in a swampland paradise. They can't figure out how to grow food in the strange soil. They can't survive the brutal climate. They can't make any money from the endless wilderness around them. 20 years later, Charleston has become the richest city in colonial America. Wealthier than Boston, more luxurious than Philadelphia, more sophisticated than New York. The aristocrats living there possess fortunes that European nobility would envy. But here's what's going to blow your mind. This transformation happened because of one plant, one grain that nobody in Europe had ever heard of. One crop that generated more wealth per acre than tobacco, more profit than sugar, more riches than anything colonial America had ever produced. Rice, and the knowledge of how to grow it, came from the most unlikely source imaginable. Enslaved Africans, people who were brought to Charleston in chains, treated as property, denied basic human rights, and whose agricultural expertise created American fortunes beyond European imagination. This is the story of how the greatest agricultural revolution in colonial history was built on both genius and brutality. How incredible innovation and systematic exploitation created American prosperity. How one city became both a monument to human achievement and a testament to human cruelty. But there's something else about Charleston that's going to change everything you think you know about American slavery. Because this isn't just a story about oppression, it's a story about knowledge, African knowledge, agricultural science that Africans brought to America, and that Americans used to build an empire. The rice empire that rose from Charleston's swamps proves something historians are only beginning to understand. African Americans didn't just provide labor for American development. They provided the technical expertise that made American development possible, the impossible beginning. Let me take you back to Charleston's hopeless beginning. The Carolina colony is England's most expensive failure in American colonization. Picture the scene. English settlers step off ships into what looks like tropical paradise. Endless forests, pristine rivers, fertile-looking soil, perfect climate for agriculture. Everything suggests easy prosperity. The reality? Charleston is built on some of the most challenging agricultural land in North America. The soil is different from anything European farmers understand. The climate is more brutal than anything English colonists have experienced. The growing seasons, rainfall patterns, and environmental conditions require agricultural knowledge that simply doesn't exist in European farming traditions. By 1680, the Carolina colony is on the verge of abandonment. Crops fail regularly. Settlers can barely feed themselves, much less generate export profits. The English investors who funded the colony are losing massive amounts of money with no prospect of return. But there's something else making Charleston's situation hopeless. The settlers themselves don't know how to work. Unlike the desperate survival colonies we've seen in Jamestown or Plymouth, Charleston attracts English gentlemen who expect to get rich from supervising other people's labor while maintaining aristocratic lifestyles. These aren't farmers. They're not craftsmen. They're definitely not agricultural innovators. They're investors who expected American land to generate European wealth without European knowledge or American adaptation. The result is predictable disaster. Gentlemen colonists who won't learn agricultural techniques, trying to grow European crops in American soil, using European methods in American climate, while expecting to maintain European social hierarchies in American wilderness. By 1685, Charleston is dying. Not from starvation like Jamestown, but from incompetence, from the fundamental failure to understand that American prosperity requires American innovation. And then something extraordinary happens, something that will transform not just Charleston, but the entire economic foundation of American civilization. The knowledge revolution. Here's where the story becomes both miraculous and tragic. Charleston's salvation comes from the most unexpected source, the people the colonists are systematically oppressing. By 1685, Charleston's population includes hundreds of enslaved Africans brought from rice-growing regions of West Africa, particularly the area that becomes Sierra Leone, Liberia, and parts of present-day Ghana and Senegal. These aren't just laborers, they're agricultural experts with sophisticated knowledge of rice cultivation, irrigation systems, and wetland farming techniques that don't exist anywhere in European agricultural science. Picture what this means. English colonists are struggling to grow anything in Charleston's challenging environment. Meanwhile, enslaved Africans are watching this agricultural failure while possessing exactly the knowledge needed to transform the same land into unprecedented prosperity. The breakthrough comes sometime around 1685, probably through informal conversations between enslaved Africans and colonists, desperate enough to listen to any suggestion that might prevent starvation. Here's what African agricultural experts knew that Europeans didn't. Charleston's swampland wasn't agricultural failure, it was rice-growing paradise. The tidal rivers, seasonal flooding and humid climate created perfect conditions for wetland rice cultivation. But rice agriculture requires incredibly sophisticated techniques, understanding tidal patterns for irrigation timing, creating complex water control systems for flooding and draining fields, knowing precise planting and harvesting schedules that coordinate with both tides and seasons. Most importantly, rice cultivation requires varieties of rice that can grow in these specific conditions, and enslaved Africans brought rice seeds with them from their homeland, hidden in their hair, sewn into clothing, carried in whatever small possessions they were allowed to keep. Think about the extraordinary irony. The same people who are being treated as property possess the agricultural knowledge that will make their masters incredibly wealthy. The agricultural miracle. By 1690, the first successful rice crops in Charleston are producing results that astound everyone, including the colonists who are profiting from them. Picture the transformation. Fields that couldn't grow European crops are now producing rice harvests that exceed anything European agriculture has achieved. Swamplands that seemed worthless are generating more agricultural wealth per acre than the best farmland in England. But here's what makes this truly extraordinary. Charleston rice isn't just successful, it's superior to rice from anywhere else in the world. The combination of African agricultural expertise, American environmental conditions, and innovative farming techniques creates rice varieties that European markets prefer to anything imported from Asia. Charleston rice is whiter, cleaner, and stores better than Asian rice. It ships more reliably across the Atlantic. It commands premium prices in European markets, hungry for high-quality grain. By 1695, Charleston rice exports are generating profits that transform the entire colonial economy. Ship captains compete for Charleston cargoes. European merchants establish permanent agents in the city. International trade routes center on Charleston Harbor. But the agricultural miracle creates a moral catastrophe. The more successful rice cultivation becomes, the more enslaved Africans are imported to expand production. Here's the economic logic that will define Charleston for the next century. Rice profits are so extraordinary that plantation owners want to maximize production by any means necessary. And the most efficient way to expand rice production is to import more people who understand rice agriculture. Between 1690 and 1720, Charleston's enslaved population explodes from hundreds to thousands, then tens of thousands. not just as laborers, but as agricultural experts whose knowledge makes continued expansion possible. The same African expertise that created Charleston's prosperity ensures that more Africans will be enslaved to extend that prosperity. The plantation system emerges. By 1700, rice wealth is creating something unprecedented in colonial America, a true aristocratic society based on agricultural exploitation. Picture Charleston's transformation. What began as a struggling frontier settlement is becoming a sophisticated city with grand mansions, formal gardens, elaborate social customs, and cultural refinement that rivals anything in Europe. But this aristocratic society depends entirely on a system of brutal exploitation that's more extensive and more systematized than anything colonial America has previously seen. Charleston plantation owners aren't just using enslaved labor. They're creating an entire economic system based on the principle that human beings can be owned as productive property. Here's how the plantation system works. Successful rice cultivation requires large-scale operations with complex irrigation, precise timing, and sophisticated agricultural management. Small family farms can't achieve the efficiency needed for maximum profits. So Charleston develops massive plantations where hundreds of enslaved Africans work under systematic supervision to produce rice for international export. These aren't just farms, they're agricultural factories with production quotas, efficiency measurements, and profit optimization strategies. And the knowledge that makes this system work still comes primarily from enslaved Africans who understand rice cultivation better than their masters. Think about the psychological complexity. Plantation owners are accumulating unprecedented wealth from agricultural techniques they don't fully understand, managed by people they treat as property but depend on as experts. Enslaved Africans are forced to use their sophisticated knowledge to generate profits that will fund their own continued enslavement and the importation of more Africans to expand the system. By 1710, Charleston rice plantations are producing wealth that transforms not just individual families, but the entire social structure of colonial America. Charleston plantation owners become the wealthiest people in American history to that point. Wealthier than Boston merchants, Philadelphia entrepreneurs, or Virginia tobacco planters, their wealth creates political influence, cultural sophistication, and social refinement. But it also creates moral blindness to the human cost of their prosperity. The cultural transformation. By 1715, Charleston has become something that doesn't exist anywhere else in colonial America, a genuine aristocratic society with European-level cultural sophistication built on an American economic foundation. Picture walking through Charleston in 1720. Grand mansions with formal gardens and European-trained architects. Private libraries with the latest books from London and Paris. Art collections that rival those of European nobility. Musical performances featuring professional musicians imported from Europe. Charleston's elite are sending their children to be educated in England. They're importing furniture, clothing, and luxury goods directly from European manufacturers. They're living lifestyles that most English aristocrats couldn't afford. But this cultural flowering depends entirely on wealth generated by enslaved Africans working in conditions that are becoming increasingly brutal as production demands increase. Here's what makes Charleston's aristocratic culture particularly complex. It includes significant contributions from enslaved and free Africans who are creating distinctive American cultural innovations. Charleston architecture incorporates building techniques from West Africa, adapted to American climate and materials. Charleston cuisine blends European, African, and Native American ingredients in ways that create entirely new food traditions. Charleston music combines African rhythms, European melodies, and American innovations in forms that will eventually influence all American popular music. Even Charleston's famous gardens reflect African agricultural knowledge about plants, growing techniques, and landscape design, adapted to American conditions. So Charleston's aristocratic culture isn't just built on African agricultural knowledge, it's enriched by African cultural knowledge that makes American cultural development possible. But the same cultural creativity that enhances Charleston's sophistication also makes slavery more profitable by creating skilled craftsmen, innovative techniques, and cultural products that can be sold or exported. The more culturally valuable enslaved Africans become, the more economically valuable they become, which ensures their continued enslavement and the expansion of the system. The economic empire. By 1725, Charleston Rice has created something unprecedented, an American city that's economically integrated with global markets on equal terms with European commercial centers. Picture Charleston's harbor. Ships from London, Amsterdam, Hamburg, and Mediterranean ports compete for Charleston rice cargoes. International merchants maintain permanent offices in the city. Financial instruments are traded that connect Charleston directly to European banking centers. Charleston has become the central node in a global economic network that extends from West African rice-growing regions through American plantation production to European consumer markets. But here's what makes this global integration truly extraordinary. Charleston rice is setting international prices. European markets are adjusting their trading strategies to Charleston production cycles. International cuisine is incorporating Charleston rice as a standard ingredient. This isn't just colonial export success. This is American economic leadership in global markets. Charleston rice exports are generating more revenue than many European countries earn from their entire national economies. The city's per capita wealth exceeds that of London, Amsterdam, or any other major commercial center. And this wealth is creating economic opportunities beyond rice production itself. Charleston merchants are investing rice profits in shipping, banking, manufacturing, and real estate development. The city becomes a financial center that funds economic development throughout the American colonies. Charleston-based capital helps fund expansion in other colonies, supports infrastructure development, and provides credit for commercial ventures from New York to Georgia. Rice wealth is creating the financial foundation for American economic development far beyond Charleston itself. But there's something else happening that will define American economic development for the next 150 years. The plantation system is proving that extraordinary wealth can be generated through systematic exploitation of human knowledge and labor. The political influence. By 1730, Charleston's rice wealth has created political influence that extends far beyond South Carolina. Charleston plantation owners are becoming major players in colonial politics, British imperial policy, and American continental development. Here's what rice wealth makes possible politically. Charleston's elite can afford to send representatives to London, influence British colonial policy, and coordinate with other American colonial leaders on equal financial terms. When the American colonies need to resist British taxation, Charleston provides crucial financial resources. When revolutionary movements require funding, Charleston rice profits help support American independence. But Charleston's political influence creates a fundamental contradiction in American political development. The same wealth that funds American freedom comes from systematic denial of African freedom. Charleston plantation owners become advocates for American liberty while depending on African slavery. They develop sophisticated arguments for individual rights while treating human beings as property. They support representative government while denying representation to the people whose knowledge created their wealth. This contradiction will shape American politics for generations. American democracy developing alongside American slavery, American freedom coexisting with African oppression, American prosperity depending on systematic exploitation. The political theories that justify American independence also have to justify American slavery. The economic arguments for American freedom also have to explain African bondage. Charleston's rice empire creates the wealth that makes American political independence possible, but it also creates the moral contradictions that will eventually threaten American political unity. By 1740, Charleston politics demonstrates both American political innovation and American political hypocrisy. The city produces some of the most sophisticated arguments for human rights and some of the most systematic violations of human rights. The human cost. By 1740, Charleston's rice empire has created unprecedented prosperity for plantation owners and unspeakable suffering for the enslaved Africans whose knowledge and labor make that prosperity possible. Picture the reality behind Charleston's elegant mansions. Rice cultivation requires brutal physical labor in disease-infested swamplands. Enslaved workers spend long days in water and mud, exposed to mosquitoes, snakes, and tropical diseases that Europeans can't survive. The mortality rates among enslaved rice workers are higher than in any other form of American agriculture. People die from malaria, yellow fever, dysentery, and simple exhaustion at rates that require constant importation of new workers to maintain production levels. But the human cost extends beyond physical suffering to systematic cultural destruction. Enslaved Africans are forbidden to maintain their traditional religions, languages, or cultural practices, even as their traditional agricultural knowledge generates enormous profits for their masters. Children born into slavery grow up knowing that their own expertise will be used to fund their continued enslavement. Families are separated when economic opportunities require moving workers between plantations. The same rice cultivation knowledge that could create prosperity for African communities is instead used to create wealth for people who treat Africans as property rather than partners. Yet somehow, despite systematic oppression, enslaved Africans continue to innovate, create, and contribute to American cultural development. They develop new rice varieties better adapted to American conditions. They create cultural traditions that blend African heritage with American experiences. They maintain family and community bonds despite systematic efforts to destroy them. The resilience and creativity that enslaved Africans demonstrate under impossible conditions becomes one of the defining characteristics of American cultural development. Their ability to maintain humanity under dehumanizing conditions, to create beauty under brutal circumstances, to preserve dignity despite systematic degradation, establishes patterns of resistance and survival that will influence all American social development. The lasting legacy. By 1750, Charleston's rice empire has established patterns that will define American development for the next century. Extraordinary prosperity, coexisting with systematic exploitation, technological innovation based on cultural oppression, economic success dependent on moral compromise. Charleston proves that Americans can achieve remarkable things when they combine European ambition, African knowledge, and American opportunities. But it also proves that Americans can commit terrible injustices while convincing themselves they're creating civilization. The rice empire demonstrates American capacity for both incredible achievement and incredible brutality, often within the same economic system, sometimes by the same people. But Charleston's legacy extends beyond the moral contradictions of slavery to the positive contributions that African Americans made to American development despite systematic oppression. African agricultural knowledge didn't just create Charleston's rice wealth. It established techniques that influenced American agriculture for generations. Water management systems, crop rotation methods, and environmental adaptation strategies developed on Charleston plantations became standard practices throughout American farming. African cultural innovations in Charleston architecture, cuisine, music, and craftsmanship became defining elements of American cultural identity, influencing artistic development far beyond the South. Most importantly, the intellectual tradition of innovation under oppression, creativity despite exploitation, and cultural preservation through systematic destruction becomes a crucial component of American cultural strength. The same resilience that enabled enslaved Africans to create prosperity for their oppressors while maintaining their own humanity becomes a model for all Americans facing impossible challenges and systematic disadvantages. The eternal contradiction. Standing in Charleston today, you can still see the grand mansions built with rice wealth, the elegant gardens designed with African knowledge, and the beautiful architecture that combined European aesthetics with African techniques. But in 1740, this wasn't historical monument. It was living proof that American prosperity could be built on both human genius and human exploitation. Imagine one final moment. Picture yourself walking through a Charleston rice field at sunset in 1735. The sophisticated irrigation systems channeled tidal waters through precisely engineered channels. The rice plants, descended from African seeds, grow in perfect rows across former swampland, transformed into agricultural paradise. Enslaved workers, whose agricultural expertise made this transformation possible, finish another day of labor that generates wealth they will never own, using knowledge they developed but can never formally claim. You're witnessing the fundamental American contradiction, a society that achieves remarkable things through the systematic denial of credit to the people who make those achievements possible. Charleston's rice empire teaches the most complex lesson in American history. This country has always possessed extraordinary capacity for both justice and injustice, innovation and exploitation, achievement and oppression. The same American creativity that transforms wilderness into prosperity can be used to transform people into property. The same American innovation that develops new agricultural techniques can be used to develop new systems of oppression. But Charleston also teaches that human knowledge, creativity and dignity cannot be completely suppressed, even by systematic exploitation. African Americans continued to innovate, create, and contribute to American development, despite every effort to reduce them to mere property. Their contributions to American agriculture, architecture, cuisine, music, and culture become permanent parts of American identity, influencing development far beyond their own communities and far beyond their historical period. The rice empire that rose from Charleston's swamps stands as both monument to human achievement and warning about human capacity for evil. It proves that Americans can accomplish extraordinary things, but it also proves that extraordinary accomplishments don't automatically create extraordinary morality. Every American generation faces Charleston's challenge: how to build prosperity without exploitation, how to achieve success without systematic injustice, how to create wealth without destroying the people whose knowledge and labor make that wealth possible. That's all for our journey through Charleston's transformation from wilderness to rice empire. If there's another moment when remarkable achievement coexisted with terrible injustice, another place where innovation and oppression built prosperity together, another story about how human genius was used to create both civilization and suffering, let me know in the comments. Because the real American story includes both the extraordinary achievements and the moral failures, both the remarkable innovations and the systematic injustices, both the human creativity that built this country and the human cost of that construction. Charleston's rice empire rose and fell. The challenge of building prosperity without exploitation never will.